Greetings. It's so lovely to be with you again, Ken, and to share this time and space with you. I'm excited for our talk today. We are focusing on loss and a little brief bio of me. My name is Francesca Arnoldi, and I consider myself to be a death lit author and a death literacy advocate. I do quite a bit of speaking, teaching, writing, and also private practice work as a doula, a little bit of research as a story listening researcher in the doula field still, and I'm a hospice volunteer. How about you, Ken? You want to introduce us to you?
Well, sure, Francesca. Well, I first met you in the doula class that you taught at the University of Vermont, and that was really a great introduction. I'm a veterinarian. I'm currently an in-home euthanasia veterinarian, and I consider myself a veterinary doula. I have now had the privilege to release the spirits of over 1,200 animals, dogs, cats, and one white mouse. And I'm really excited about this conversation about how to be a grief companion for both humans and our animal companions. There's a lot of similarities, some differences, and I think all of us can learn how to be the best companion possible. So, Francesca, why don't you share with your initiation story?
Yeah, so back about a decade ago, we had a number of losses in our family, and one of those losses was the death of our beloved dog, Bella. And this was a time when our children were young. They were in the kind of preschool age, and it was going to be their first major loss and their first look at death itself in real life. And so I wanted to wade into this territory thoughtfully, and I also wanted to follow my heart. And I hadn't had a whole lot of experience with loss actually myself. My grandparents lived into really later adulthood, and they lived long lives. And I had experienced one major loss in my 20s of a beloved aunt, but otherwise really loss hadn't been part of my walk. So I didn't have a whole lot of lived experience as somebody who was facing loss and enduring it. At the same time, I was holding space for my children and really thinking about their needs as well. We knew that Bella was getting more and more sick, and with the help of a wonderful vet, we were able to sort of identify when she was going to reach the point of tipping the scales toward too much suffering, not enough quality of life, and that when we would feel like we were selfishly keeping her for us, much to her own pain that she was enduring. So we knew that that time was coming. We were enjoying the time that we had with her and keeping her comfortable. And then when we did reach that point, which was actually discovered by my daughter, and she sort of pointed out to us, and we knew we were sort of ready for it, but we weren't ready for it at all. But we had made up our minds, and we knew that that was the point, and we didn't want to extend any additional suffering for her. So my husband, Bella had been his dog before we had even met, he really sort of took charge and wanted to be the one who was with her during her final moments. That was really important for him. And he felt like that needed to be between the two of them. And we gave our blessing for that. And then the rest of us were involved in her burial. So he brought her home. And additionally, part of his grief process was to physically dig the grave. And I think that that was a way of him sort of moving some of that emotion through. The physical movements helped him as he was integrating this really profound loss. And then we laid her to rest as a family. And with that, we incorporated some ritual and some ceremony to be able to really kind of lean into it and mark the moment and feel our way through together. And part of that was with our blessing stone ceremony that we will sometimes do during a significant beginning or a significant ending. And so I asked my two kids and my husband, and for myself as well, to go pick up a gift from nature and kind of gather back up at her burial plot, and we each held our blessing stone or leaf or flower or whatever it was that we had found in nature. And we took a turn. If we wanted to, we could share some words and wishes and love for Bella aloud, some memories, just what we really treasured about her, what we will miss about her, and saying thank you and goodbye to her. And then we released our blessing stones in with her body before burying her. And I remember, I mean, there was just so much emotion, such a range. It was all invited to be a part of it. We all had our own expressions of what that felt like and sounded like and looked like. And then I remember we took a little bit of time on a picnic blanket near her her final resting place. And we watched the clouds and we talked a little bit more about it. And it was an utter heartbreak, and it was a really beautiful time of connection. And I think for my kids, it was their initiation as well. My initiation as somebody who could maybe support others through their grieving and lead them through a process of saying goodbye, as well as my own process of saying goodbye. And it was their initiation and helping to build their frame of reference for what loss could look like and how they could be themselves through it and be open about what they were experiencing. So it really sticks with me and sort of set the stage for lots of other ways that I continue to process grief. So I'd love to hear your initiation story.
Sure. Yeah. Mine actually comes from the human side, even though I'm a veterinarian. My first uh, introduction to death was with my grandparents, and it was in the 60s. And so I remember my grandmother actually was laid in her coffin in the living room. I mean, it was when you died at home and you stayed at home, and that's all changed in the last period where we died in hospitals or veterinary clinics. And so my real introduction to death was the death of my father, Casimir, and he was a survivor of heart disease, but he eventually became weakened, and he was in the dying process, and so he was in hospice, and so that was my first introduction to hospice. And we brought him home, and so we got to be with him even as he no longer could speak, and it was a real sort of an out of body experience, but it was a privilege to be there. And I remember the last emotions my dad showed me is he had a parrot named Apollo, and I brought the parrot in to his room, and he looked at it, and his eyes widened, and he smiled, and that was the last emotion that he gave us, and it was his animal companion. And so he died at home, and we all were there, and I noticed that some of my nieces and nephews were encouraged to be there at the death, and others were kept away. And so I realized that each family has their own um, need or experience around death, and it's my belief that the children that were there got a life lesson that was really powerful, because I know that's how it was for me. And so it's really and then the other time that I was really empowered with death and loss was during the early AIDS pandemic. I started practice in San Francisco in the 1980s, and I lost over 300 clients and dozens of friends and family. And I didn't know it at the time, but lot of us in San Francisco were being doulas, death doulas. We were helping our friends and clients and family members die, and we didn't have a name for it. And so it wasn't until later, when I started taking these courses on the pet death doula, that I realized that's what most of us were at this time. And I remember that one of the issues for people dying was that they had animal companions, and so they were very, very concerned about what would happen to them after they died. These were their beloved pets, and they were medicine for them, really. And so that's where I helped create Pets Are Wonderful Support, which is an organization that helped people with AIDS take care of their pets and help them adopt out their pets when they died. And so, yeah, it was really in the human world that really brought me close to death. Now, in the last 3 years, I've been privileged to be an in-home euthanasia veterinarian, and so I've been invited into people's homes at a very, very sensitive time, and I've learned to use my doula philosophy in helping them. And I find that I'm really doing 90% of my work with the humans, and of course 10% with the animals. I want to make sure they're comfortable and they have a good death. But it's really the families that are really in need of guidance. And so I offer a ceremony, I offer ritual, and obituary as well. I think all those are really important to acknowledge them and their animal companions. And yeah, so I'm really excited to be on this forefront of death and dying, because I think it's an important topic in our society as we come back to understanding it, and we can help our friends and family as becoming better versed in being a grief companion. So
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing such beautiful stories. And I feel like that's the way that we learn from one another, is through sharing our stories and how things felt for us and our perspectives, what we learned, what we wish had maybe gone differently, what we celebrate about our past and our bonds that will remain forevermore in our life with those that we have loved and lost. And like you said, that we are in this joint mission of improving our cultural death literacy and grief literacy. So ensuring that people feel like they have the language and the skills and the sensitivities and the confidence to be able to step into these times of heartache, heartbreak, loss, grief, whether it's leading up to a loss and they're feeling that anticipatory grief, or it's during the bereavement period. There's so much to discuss, there's so much to learn, and there's so much to remember. So thank you for partnering with me on this.
yeah, no, it's I'm really glad to be here.
Mm.
Um, and I think that there's a lot of topics that need to be discussed, not here at this moment, but I'm hoping that we can continue this discussion, about grief, disenfranchised grief, all the different types, and how we can be better companions for sure.
Yes, how we can honor them all. And together we will. So onward and stay tuned.